Kristi and Tanqueray on the Rocks, the Trailblazers Toolkit.
On this podcast, we dive into the messy realities of corporate life that nobody talks about over office coffee.
Grab your cocktails and join us as we get real about work, life, and everything in between. Cheers.
One of the best resources that I found when I was doing my presentation was the National Women's Law Center actually provides free consults and will connect you with the lawyer. And so I tell people before you, yes, document in a safe space. But before you go to report, which, you do have to report eventually, you probably want to consult a lawyer, which, is a privilege to be able to afford to do so. But I love to share resources about those. I think that one thing we also, I try to now pivoted, and I wish I really learned this early in career, but resetting expectations of what the workplace is and what it isn't. Workplace is not your family. And I can have friends, but the workplace is not my family. And so I actually think it's detrimental to our own mental health. It leads to burnout. There's a great TED Talk about the workplace.
Isolation, stress.
Oh, it's so good. It is the best. And it's all data driven, which I love, about why it's actually not good for your mental health to have that mindset. We are not your family, right? We can be close. I have work friends, besties that I will take with me. And I call them my text besties. So when you get to text level, it's a different type of bestie at work. And I do take them with me, right? There's places that, I still take people with me, but you need to have those boundaries. And I think people aren't going to report, or they're trusting everybody they're reporting to, or they're dismissing things because they're like, oh, but they're a family. They didn't mean that. No, they're not your family. And so I think we entered this space of unrealistic expectations, and we do need to start putting those boundaries. And I think for me, I left an organization in January, and I thought it was I was tied so much to that organization. And I realized I was I'm doing what I do, and I'm really good at what I do regardless who I do it for. And it was my personal brand I had to re-own. And I received one of the biggest STEM awards in my entire life that I ever had this year, not connected to a company. And so I think for me, it was that assurance that the work that I do and who I am is not tied to any organization. They're lucky to have me. And now I'm really thankful I'm at an organization who actually sees that and wants me to be out there doing these things and having these conversations, because they support versus you're doing on behalf of the company. No, it's my brand, right? And I that. And so I think those resetting. I also think we skip a step in acknowledging the harm. And so when folks come, same thing. I just actually got a DM that somebody says, hey, can I meet with you? Right. And I know sometimes I'm oh, what does that mean? And they could ask random question. But as I earn trust in an organization, I am a really open book, and I try to earn trust quickly. And so, having those, I do tell them hey, if it's a workplace violation, I do have an obligation report, because it is, something that my role that I have to do. I do try to work for only people leaders who HR is not there just to serve the company. We do what's right for the employee. And I will say I never experienced that until I was with my last two organizations, and seeing how HR can actually be for the employee and make decisions on behalf of the employee. And when it switches to that, it is a beautiful way of how a people team could lead with compassion and empathy. Not to mean we don't have to execute hard business decisions. Right? There are still business decisions that have to be made, but how you keep it humanely is really important.
But you can still care for people. Yeah.
Absolutely. Right. And you can do hard things in that and have hard conversations, but center them. But I do think we have to acknowledge the harm. I love the Mindy Hart always says about the work, people are always telling you what racism is and isn't, versus realizing that it's real. And so I think especially white colleagues are trying to say, this is racism, or this is not, or that wasn't racist. Have you heard that? That wasn't racist. And you're that was clearly racist. Why do you get to say that? Right? No, we're having a meeting, not a powwow. Don't say it again. I'm witty. We talk about now when people are oh, let's go have a powwow about it. I'm should I bring my regalia? And they're what the hell is regalia? I was oh, I thought we were going to have a powwow. Are you going to cook fry bread? What's good? And they feel real dumb. And I'm real brave in saying it now. But, I also think the like seeking outside support. And it's not just like, yes, your family, yes, but your coach, your community, but also a therapist. I think I experienced workplace harm in 2 organizations. And one of the things I had to do is I was so thankful to have a therapist to go to. And I don't think I was able, because they're not going to gaslight you. And they're going to have that real to move you through it, because you're going to have to some point acknowledge and work through that harm. If you don't heal, you will never heal and be okay on the other side. And so I do think like leaning into professionals in the space is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of bravery. And so those are kind of like the tangible things that I think, and then I think like when you, like, I always tell folks that like your safety is your biggest priority. And so if you like some of these things, we're talking about microaggressions, but some of these things can be really, really challenging, and
Macro.
safety is the biggest concern. And so you have to make decisions that prioritizes your safety first, and then realize, is this actually a safe step for me to take, or will I feel comfortable? And sometimes, you know, even because of legalities and depending on state and federal laws, but like you have to then tell the maybe the harasser that stop, right? Like, I don't appreciate your behavior. You actually had to tell them that, because they acknowledge that it was. But like, if it's not safe, it never matters. Like, if you do not feel safe, do not do it. And I think that we have to talk about that safety in the workplace for women, because we are not protected enough, and the workplace is not protecting us. And so we have to lift each other up and make sure that we're educating each other on that.
Thanks, Sunny. The other piece of that is, you know, we're not safe in the workplace. And then being a woman of color, like there's so many other layers, or it's multiplied, if you will, or maybe even subtracted away from your safety. So messaging coming from me versus my white colleague is taken very differently. So I'm,
Performance reviews,
feeling,
hashtag performance reviews, not feedback. We know.
it's very, very different.
That's why
Very
the
different.
tiers start. That's why the tiers start, because it's like the data shows the majority of the times it's unfair feedback, or women of color are actually not given the feedback they need and deserve to be successful in the timely manner
Grow.
on it to grow. And they're giving it to a backhanded, they're giving boogeyman feedback, they're giving all this whatever, and then you're frustrated. And then that's when I start crying. When I'm frustrated, it's tears.
Frustrated. It's based on like behavior or things about your character, things that you like about yourself that inherently are
okay,
you.
how can I change that?
Yeah, I can't change that.
Well, and I'm going to hop in here too, like not as a woman of color. I will say I'm a first and only and a different in many spaces that I'm in, and I'm going to pipe up here. Number one, tears, absolutely agree. Anger, all performance reviews, and the gaslighting that goes on during those for, hey, we really like how aggressive you are to get those deals closed. Love that you brought in $7 million in assets under management in the last 3 months. But then you get to your performance review. Hey, your colleagues find you really assertive. You're really aggressive. And actually, if you could tone that down and not be the first to speak up in meetings, well, I'm the first to speak up in meetings because Tom, Dick, and Harry over here won't let me talk if I'm not the first to speak up in a meeting. So I know that I get one chance because the conversation goes around me, and then they want to bat it back and forth between the 6 bro code that have going on over here. And I know that I won't get the opportunity to speak back. And I will say that doesn't just happen in male dominated spaces. I've experienced that in other spaces as well, where maybe my voice wasn't necessarily wanted at times. I also wanted to say about therapy. Most people who follow the show know that I've been married to a marriage and family therapist for over 20 years. I've been dating my husband, who's been in therapy since I was 19, and I just turned 44 last week. So people get more than they bargained for when they hire Kristi Straw and bring her into an organization, and they are not prepared for the mirror that I am for their shit and the way that they show up and how that impacts people in the spaces and the rooms that they're in. And so when the conversation is, hey, I don't think we should continue to call ourselves a family. I don't think it's appropriate that we need to say that we're one big family here, because we do not act like a family. We should not act like a family. Those conversations aren't necessarily super well received, especially from somebody who has an extreme amount of therapeutic background and training, and is a communication expert, well-versed in feelings. The other thing is, it makes me sad, Sunny, that you started your sentence earlier with, we can have both feelings and, well, I say empathy and execution, because that's what I say. Empathy and execution. No shit. We should not have to continue to say that. We should not have to, as women, continue to say, hey, guess what, board of directors and everybody else who says they love data, but very conveniently don't seem to look at the data around diversity and the innovation and the results that it improves, and all of the other things that data clearly shows. We should not have to say that a feeling of empathy and belonging, which is what all companies are saying that they want, yet they're rolling back DEI efforts. So again, actions and words aren't aligning. We should not have to say that empathy and execution can go together. That should not be a statement that we have to continue to say, but we do, because we have to show up in these spaces where women's humanity or our tears or our feelings or the way that we show up at all is constantly under attack. It wasn't built for us. I am included in that. It wasn't built for me either. I'm included in so much of what we're talking about here today. To the degree that you are, absolutely not, but not to take away any of the experience. And lastly, Zaibis, compassion fatigue is real. People who come to us because our doors are always open. I've always been the ally. I've always been the one that people of color will come to and say, hey, Kristi, and by the way, this doesn't feel good to say this, but this is the truth. So I'm going to say it. It really sucks to know that people are coming to me and they don't have a choice. I'm the white person that they have the ear of, that was the executive leader that could get it done. That sucks. I mean, I'm glad I am that person, yay. But it sucks that it's a system and it's the situation. So recognize
it's not
also
more people who can help and support and build the right type of organization.
Yeah, and I just think there's compassion fatigue from that part too. You want to help, but you also recognize that you're in this really sticky, awkward position of, on the one hand, being the voice that can help, and on the other, probably being quite despised that they have to go to you in the first place. Hey, it's not fun being in that position, in case anyone was wondering how I felt. It sucks. So none of us in this moment, at least probably on this call, in this moment in our country, I think feels super great. And it is, somebody said the word shuddering earlier. I mean, my voice is shaking, and it ain't because I'm nervous. It's because I feel emotional. And when I sit down in spaces and tears flow, even before a call, 3 times on the call, I always have Kleenex near. It's just all of the pent up everything that we're never allowed to express, because we're still in a world where we have to say, you can get business done and have emotions at the same time. And we're still in a stupid ass world where HR people call these things soft skills instead of human skills, only further creating more distance and lumping soft skills with femininity, which seems to be a problem in so many spaces. So I've just been holding on to all of that while also learning. And I appreciate having a space to be able to puke it all out, because it's heavy over here too.
I know we're not thanks for sharing, Kristi. I know we don't have like a ton of time left, but I do think I would not feel like I could leave here. I would regret leaving here without sharing this. I do think for me is recognizing, and we've done like a roadshow, I don't know, TED Talks, some colleagues that I work with, and it's a Black woman, myself as Indigenous, and a white woman, and we have conversations about experiences in the workplace and allyship, and why there's an allyship gap from all the data. We've seen McKinsey, we've seen Lean In, right? And we talk about how my good friend Stacy walks into a room and she's judged the minute when she walks in, right, by the color of her skin, and I have a privilege that I could be white passing, right? And so we talk about what that looks like and where it's, responsibility. And we talk about how as a Black woman, and being Native American, we don't have a lot of us. And so really the allyship. And then we talk about how our friend Kirsten has showed up really, really well and beautiful in ways and where she's had to learn. And I will say one of the things, and this is really hard because some of my closest friends are white women, and some of the people who've done the most harm in my career have been white women. And it's actually the women who I trust less in this space. And so it is, when I look at like who the biggest oppressors in my career have been, I can probably say while I sit in a male dominated, right, Indian or white, male dominated spaces, predominantly was where my career has been, the biggest oppressors and just harm done have been some from white women. And I think that has been hard. That's honestly where a lot of my therapy has had to come in, is how do I hold these sacred friendships, right? True friendships. And to be able to talk. Luckily, I have people around in my circle who we can have these conversations, who we can have accountability, where we could hold spaces. But I think like, in corporate America, that's hard to say. And I feel like sometimes I get intimidated. I definitely am more careful of how I present myself with, like, y'all know how you rewrite the email 7 times. Thank goodness for ChatGPT. Now I can put that thing and be like, be nice with this, right? Like I could, like, I just want to say like, hey, can you send me this file? And instead I'm like, hey, Sally, how was your day? I hope you had a great weekend. How are the kids doing? Right. And so, anyway, I just like, for me, I mean, this is like maybe 2.0 of this podcast, but I do think like it was something I needed to acknowledging the harm to be able to unpack it and move forward. And that's where a lot of my work has been, and where I have now invested in my space for speaking to women of color, that I'm not disregarding anybody's experiences, because the data shows that women do have these experiences, and the number of frequencies that women of color are experiencing them are like, it's like 3 to 5x depending on what the biases are. And then I think like we also like unpacking that, what does this mean for our careers? And we also say, how many times have we said performance reviews, right? And like the feedback, right. We're seeing the salary gaps, right? The pay gaps, we're seeing promotions, right? Like we're seeing hiring, right? So when you look at the employee life cycle of a woman of color, you're seeing this actually affect the bottom line and what's the cycle. And we're seeing then why there's a leaky bucket, and women of color are leaving whatever institutions, organizations, tech, right? I mean, thank you, Walmart, for letting me know that I don't ever want to work for Walmart, right?
Yeah, and I feel like a real jerk, because I just did 5 podcasts ago. I said something good about Walmart, Tanqueray, and now look at the shit they're doing. But I take it back. I just want to go on record.
I think Bray said, thank you for letting me know who you are. And I'm like, yes, thank you.
Yeah. Sunny, I have a question. Exactly. What does it mean that the people who have done the most harm in my career are also white women? What does that mean?
Better go have conversations with your people.
Yeah, man. Gotta check it.
Yeah, because you're the closest to them. That's the accountability.
Yeah. When you said that, Sunny, I thought about every job that I've left. So I've started my career as a civil engineer, and I worked at VDOT, and great career. And I left when I was working for a white woman. Moved on to commercial construction and residential construction. I left because of a white woman. Commercial real estate, same thing. Healthcare, same thing. And most recently, leaving corporate and starting my own, same.
But when white women get it right and do their own work and acknowledge the harm, they will be your best advocates and allies. And that, though, is also why we see the allyship gap and why these conversations are needed, right? And so, yeah, it's not like we're saying, oh, it's only men who sit here and ask about your earrings and your hair. No, right? Like spaces that I've sat in, while the numbers you would make assumptions, it's also, white women in the spaces. And
they're more covert, I think. Like a man might say, why is those earrings so long? But I think like in my experience, the conversations when I was at an executive table, it was more covert, the things that I was hearing, and the things, frankly, that I was being asked to carry out and did not, which is why I no longer work in those two organizations. It was more covert, but the commentary that was not associated with the actual task and job being done at hand, which is my nice way of saying it had not shit to do with the actual job that was supposed to be being done. Those conversations were coming from white women. I'm telling you right now. Sat there.
Bray, do you have any experiences with that, or yeah? Sorry, go once. Yeah.
I was going to say, before we jump, Kristi, you said a lot that, you know, when people come to you and you're the white woman, that it sucks, it sucks, it sucks. I think I'm going to do like what you do, right? I would like to say, I want to challenge you to kind of reframe that knowledge, to think about how are people leveraging your privilege, and how can you use that as an ally to leverage your privilege as a white woman, right? To help others, because instead of saying it sucks, yeah, like I'm sure you do, right? But I think also think about people trust you enough that they're willing to go to you to leverage your privilege to be able to kind of change the system from the inside.
And you're not the one who's harming other people.
Yeah. No, I probably did a bad job of saying it. I'm saying, and thank you for that, Zaibis, you're 100% correct. What I was trying to say was, I think it sucks that it's even, and this is where Tanqueray said, girl, get over it, a couple weeks ago. It sucks that it's even a thing. Like, I hate that it's a thing. I hate that I have to be the person, because I have the privilege, right? Let's call it what it is, that people come to. And because you said, Sonny, or somebody said, Zaibis said, well, who's the white sponsor that they can go to that has the white boss that they can go to? I'm the white executive boss. But that was me. And so what I'm saying sucked about it was, one, that was even a thing. They couldn't just go to who they needed to go to have the conversation they need to have to get the things done that they needed to get done. I'm grateful. I'm thankful. I would never change it. I've been in executive coaching for 7 years with a Black man for a reason. I knew there was a lot of ignorance that I needed to work on. I put myself in uncomfortable situations for a reason, and I've worked really hard to be that person that people come to. What sucks about it is that it's 2020 freaking 5 almost, and y'all still have to do that. That's the part.
Radical acceptance. Right. Get over the suck, make decisions in the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I agree with that too. Like, and this is no shade at all, but I'm just like, you got to deal with it. I even, like, I talk to my mom all the time about, like, I think of a world of, like, my grandmother, right? Like, she's never seen a world of, like, there's never not been racism. There's never not been some sort of social injustice. Like, the only thing that really has changed is really, like, you know, the fact that it's more digital. Like, she got to see it on her iPhone and, like, learn the iPhone to even see it. So I don't know. I think it just comes with responsibility. Like,
you know, I was going to say, to that point too, about I was in therapy recently, and my doctor asked me, she's like, you know, Zaibis, if racism was out of the equation, would you still feel the same way about work? And I was like, yes, girl, toxic work is toxic work. So yes. But I was reflecting on that with a colleague of mine who recently left our organization to work somewhere else, and she works with all people of color. The whole executive leadership is all people of color. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is that like? And she's like, you know what, Zaibis, for the first time in my life, she's like, I can take off this armor that I wear and be real and, like, connect with people on a real place. Now, that's not to say that microaggressions still don't happen, because nobody's perfect and people are still always learning. And, you know, even myself, recently something happened and I was like, my bad. I had an autocorrect on my email and I wrote someone's name incorrectly, which is something that I care about a lot. And, like, acknowledging that and apologizing even when you make a mistake, right? Like, stuff happens to me every day on the daily. But when I do something, acknowledging that and being able to have the humility to apologize to that person, even if they didn't catch it, like if you catch it later that you said something or did something, how do you go back and apologize, no matter what your identities are that you hold? But, you know, what would that look like if, you know, when you think about your workplace, like if you remove this huge thing that is like one of the main factors that kind of impact the workplace, would you still feel the same way about your workplace? Does that change your feelings?
And no workplace is perfect. Let's just be honest.
No.
There will be something that exists no matter where you go. And it's really what you're willing to either put up with or what your core values are. I think, like, that's where I lean into so much now. It's what are my core values? What am I willing to compromise on? What am I
Right.
not? Right. And I think like defining that before I go into an interview loop. And then sometimes also, like, especially in this market, you might just need to get a job, and you might need to get a job
Correct.
to get a paycheck. And then that's a core value because you got to get paid.
Mhm.
And then you go figure
Yeah.
that out. And not everybody has that privilege to be able to flex those in that time. And I
Yeah.
think that's a, reality of the state, and like radical acceptance is the environment we're in, and it might not be perfect, but and so I think like as you become more senior, as you become more into come for who you are, and I'm still growing up, right? I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I still want to be an astronaut one day. And so really, I think it's like moving into that and choosing what are your non-negotiables. Like I took, a pay cut to be able to have more flexibility and time with my kids, right? And I'm really happy, right?
Mhm.
Where, 2 years might be different, right? I might be like, no, I want to go for that really senior chief diversity, chief something role, right? And run things where I'm working 80 hours a week. Now I'm like loving life because I'm not stressed at work all the time.
I was gonna ask,
Yeah.
Ray,
Yeah.
how does that look like or show up in your like media stuff? And like,
Mm.
how does all these microaggressions and these micro assaults, I like that one too, show up within media?
I think there was there were some organizations that I work for that I didn't see, imagery that like looked like me. So like, or it may have been, we can get into like the skin tones and hair colors and all these things. So for me, like, that was something that I really like for my current role. I was like, nah, we're going to switch this up. And like, this is like what community looks like. And even down from like different races, like I made it a point to like make sure that there was imagery of different shapes and sizes and like ages. I thought that was important too. So it's been pretty interesting. I'm still like, admittedly, like there, I feel like particularly just in Charleston, there's a lot of politics. So I'm really starting to just navigate that and like ensuring, one, I'm vocal about like how I feel about certain things. And then like, I also am very vocal, like I choose not to align myself with that. And here are the reasons why, like, I just don't believe in, and when I say politics, I would say like, there's some hierarchy. You got to get through this hoop to, you got to know this person, you got to shake this hand. So it's been interesting, but from the media world too, it's just like, I can tell, some companies that just like, dang, you really don't have that DEI person. Like you just really is like, one way, you have this one way of thinking, or you have one way of like what the beauty standard is. And that's been interesting to navigate too. And like, sometimes I do get tired and I'm like, dang, I'm tired of always bringing this point up. But then I'm like, okay, like for me, I'm like, I feel like I'm chosen to be the one to bring that point up. But then like, if I put it in your space where I'm bringing something up, like, hey, the next time, like I need, this person over here to bring that up, and it not just be me, but it's pretty interesting. And even down, like I have to select like what influencers or media that I may work with. And I do a really good job of like, I look through a company's organization, I'm going to look at their organizational chart. I remember one time we were trying to decide if we wanted to work with this company, and they had a very unique, and I'll say cultured name, right? And you would think like, oh, this is like a company that is like for the people. And I didn't see none of my people or your people, in their like director, nothing, none of their leadership profiles. And so I was like, we can't work with them. Like, because I don't see the DEI work, like I just feel like, I think it's time. I feel like I'm going on a tangent, but I just really feel like it's time, specifically in these times, to really like be mindful of like who we align ourselves with, who we spend our money with. And really like, it's time for us to get real serious. Like ever since that Walmart announcement, like and literally like my house is it's close to a Walmart. I will take that extra 5 to 10 minutes to go, to Target. And I'll say too, like Target's a brand, right, that really has made sure that they have like been diverse in all different, angles of their marketing. So yeah. I hope that answered the question. I feel like I went.
Great. That was great.
Yeah, that's a great question. Great question. So we've gone from microaggressions of just maybe, what our idea with microaggressions are to radical acceptance. I love that, Sunny. I think that's where we all are. We have to accept that microaggressions are happening daily, minute by minute, day by day, month by month. And we all have the responsibility to either pull out that work receipt app and, track what's happening to us, advocate what's happening, document, report, so that we can change the culture and the environment that we're in. We also talked about very deep examples of, mispronouncing the names and how those things are little, sharp edges against who we are and the different cultural pieces that we bring and how those things could be um, assaulted, right? Whether it's the earrings or our dress or whatever it might be. So one, I want to, for on behalf of Kristi and I, and Kristi, please jump in. Loved having you on this episode, and this will be a series of episodes of Kristi and Tanqueray on the Rocks. This was a very deep and meaningful discussion. When I thought of the idea of having a series and bringing in individuals to speak on the topic, I didn't know quite where it was going to go, but this has been enlightening for me. It's been a bit of healing for me, and um, I can see myself in all of the examples. So I feel seen and heard, and that's important for a woman of color because we don't always get to have that experience. So thank you for your time and spending the last hours with us discussing your experiences on microaggressions. Kristi, you have any final thoughts?
Oh, only just to say thank you for sharing. It's courageous, of course, but also healing, like Tanqueray said. I think it's important. Our listeners are of growth mindset, or they probably wouldn't be listening to us. Um, and so we hope to inspire people to take something away, to learn something new, reach out to one of our guests. And if they've said something that you particularly resonated with, or you'd like to learn more, I'm sure they'd be happy to have a conversation. I certainly learned a lot. There's areas that I will continue to grow and seek more clarity around. And so I'm just grateful for the education and an opportunity to continue to learn.
Absolutely. So again, this has been another wonderful episode of Kristi and Tanqueray on the Rocks. We look forward to hearing your comments, your feedback. If you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe and follow us along on our podcast journey. Again, thank you so much and cheers.
Cheers.